Jana lost 2 friends last week. A teenager killed 9 people at a Munich shopping center before turning his gun on himself. Days earlier, another teenager, armed with axe and knife, attacked passengers on a train near Würzburg. And in Ansbach, a man killed himself and injured others after setting off an explosive device. How is Jana, for one, coping with this spate of attacks?
It makes you sad, but also afraid to know this sort of thing can happen. It's hard to believe that people were killed here, that this is where it took place. All they wanted to do was go and sit in a restaurant. Then someone came along and shot them. It's hard to get my head around it.
14-year-old Jana and her mother are visiting the scene of the attack at the Munich shopping mall. Her friends were roughly the same age as her. They were killed in the mass shooting that happened here in mid-July.
I'd been on the way here myself, but then my sister's husband called and said we shouldn't go. Something was happening. We were almost there, but we turned around and went home. I knew my friends might be there. It's where a lot of us hang out. So I was pretty scared. I put the news on as soon as I got home. My friends and I started communicating on WhatsApp and Facebook, trying to work out who might be there and who definitely wasn't. And then it turned out that 2 of our friends had been killed. It was a terrible shock.
2 Freunde von mir gestorben sind und das war totaler Schock.
Images and videos were soon circulating on the internet. An 18-year-old had gone on a shooting spree. He killed 9 people, injured many more, and then shot himself. He appears to have deliberately targeted young people with a migrant background, like himself and like Jana. How have you been since then? Can you sleep?
No, I can't. I cry all the time. It's a horrible feeling to know that a person you used to hang out with, chat with, is gone, just like that. It feels awful.
Jana's friend Selçuk was 15 years old. He liked football and Thai boxing. All she has left of him are photos on her mobile phone.
In a way, it still hasn't sunk in. I often think he's still alive, but he isn't. He's gone.
This is the second time that Jana and her mother are visiting the scene of the shootings. Locals discuss how first-hand the attack was. They knew the gunman. He was bullied in school but seemed from the outside like a nice kid. They feel lucky to be alive. Talking to others helps Jana process the tragedy. People here still can't grasp what happened. It's hard for her to come to terms with the fact that she's still alive when her friends were murdered. How do you feel now when you're out and about on your own? Do you go out?
No, I haven't dared go anywhere by myself yet.
The gunman was a German with Iranian parents. He wasn't a radical Islamist, but had far-right sympathies. He lived here in the Munich suburb of Maxvorstadt. Philipp Andersson is a migration expert based in Munich. Even though the motives behind the recent wave of attacks in Germany varied, could the perpetrators' migrant backgrounds be a factor?
They all felt like outsiders. When people are waiting for asylum applications to be processed, they live in a permanent state of uncertainty. They don't know if they'll be able to stay. And on top of that, they've been forced to flee a country and have some traumatic experiences behind them. That obviously makes it harder for them to settle and find peace.
The gunman was born in Munich. Security in the city remains tight. Against the backdrop of the recent incidents, many fear a rise in copycat crimes.
In general, whenever a very dramatic incident occurs, it gives rise to an atmosphere that might encourage others who harbor similar inclinations. It's possible that a climate develops that's conducive to copycat crimes.
Is that what happened? Just 2 days after the mass shootings in Munich, a young man died after setting off an explosive outside a music festival in Ansbach, 200 kilometers away. Thomas Meister is the pastor at the nearby St. Gumbertus Church. He was there when the bomb went off and helped look after people who'd witnessed what had happened.
We were here, enjoying the concert from a distance. We were upstairs in my apartment when we heard the explosion. I came out to see what was going on. 5 minutes later, we saw the paramedics leading people outside. So I suggested they come into our courtyard to be looked after.
Thomas Meister helped take care of them. 15 were injured and many more were in shock. The attacker himself died when the device he was carrying exploded in the middle of Ansbach's Old Town. To locals, it felt like terrorism had reached their doorstep, when it transpired that the man was a Syrian asylum seeker who had apparently had ties to IS. Recent information indicates this was the first suicide attack perpetrated in the name of IS in Germany. How does it feel, something like this happening in your town?
A lot of people have been asking, why here? Why here in this idyllic town? They think this sort of thing happens elsewhere, in the big cities, but not on their doorstep. It's a very frightening feeling. It's hard to have something like this happen so close to home. But I think we all know that it can ultimately happen anywhere.
Reverend Meister is saddened to see people such as the Ansbach attacker using religion to justify violence. He says his own faith helps him comfort others through this difficult time.
If you want to help people, you need to have empathy. You have to be able to understand how people feel, but you can't be part of their suffering. I need to keep a distance, as do doctors and nurses when they help people. You can only help others if you don't dwell on your own feelings, but put them aside.
Back in Munich, migration expert Philipp Andersson is visiting the scene of the recent mass shooting. He says the attack has changed the city.
It's very sad to see all the cuddly toys and personal messages. It really brings home how people can be hit by brutal tragedy from one minute to the next, and that we're not really able to process it emotionally.
The recent attacks have left anger, grief, and fear in their wake. Germany has taken them very personally. Andersen says it's too soon to know what the long-term repercussions will be.
It remains to be seen how much fear will remain. It depends what happens next. If there are more attacks, then fear will take root. But if there aren't, I think the mood will pass. It's understandable that a lot of people are feeling nervous right now, that they're scared of what might happen in the public arena. It's understandable, but it's not inevitable. And I do believe that our society has a basic stability that we can depend on. I don't think that fear will take hold and become part of our lives.
For those whose lives were immediately impacted by the recent attacks, fear might take longer to subside. Germany has learned the hard way that it too is vulnerable.